If you would have told your great-great-grandfather 3 or 4 generations ago, okay, it was horseback, foot travel, your world was probably as big as 200-mile radius of the village or town you lived in. And if you would have told them 3 generations ago that we would be having to purchase water at the store because there wasn't any more fresh water, clean drinking water.
Water is delivered to us where we need it, whenever we want it. Turn a faucet, and there is water, at any hour of the day or night.
Our water throughout the world is contaminated with all kinds of chemicals, and it's getting worse.
We're going to have air purifiers in our home because it's so toxic around the planet that we would actually affect the global climate through our pollution. They would have thought you were crazy. In 3 short generations, we're at the verge of destroying the oceans. All the emissions from our machines, changing the global climate, toxic waste and the genetic engineering of food.
The loss of ability to feed ourselves through other ways, and the depletion of the fish stocks in the sea is a major problem because so much depends upon that, and so many communities depend upon fish.
So many native people are being heavily contaminated, as is their whole food chain, through toxic chemicals being produced in the industrial world. Ocean currents and wind currents are driving the toxins, like PCBs, neurotoxins and so on, up into the north, into the food chain. And now you're seeing all kinds of animals like polar bears, walruses, with open lesions, cancers, all due to the buildup of some of the worst toxins on the planet. These things are happening. It's real.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know how bad my voice sounds. Brother feels just as bad. You know this baseball coronavirus comes up from you. That means the boys. And after you're a boy and grow up and know how to play ball, then you come to the boys you see representing themselves today in your national pastime. The only real game.
Wars and epidemics kind of following the same kind of patterns and behaviors.
War, the dangers of war are immense. We're still a long way from being safe from nuclear war. Some people argue it's more possible now than ever.
People still haven't figured out what happened in World War I when everybody just kind of, went crazy.
What people don't understand is they're not fighting with lances and bow and arrows and swords anymore. They're fighting with spent uranium. They're fighting with all of these bombs, cluster bombs, and all different kinds of bombs that they have.
Radioactive debris flies skyward from another underground explosion as a new weapon, the atomic satchel, joins America's arsenal.
What we leave behind in terms of whether it's depleted uranium or just landmines in countries.
And all the chemicals and everything within those bombs, they're not just destroying people. They're destroying the life of the planet that they're bombing. They're destroying the water, they're destroying the earth, they're destroying the plants, the medicines.
Dramatic in their effect, as nuclear explosions move huge masses of earth in excavation jobs, reshaping the geography of the land in dimensions never before possible to meet the needs of man.
For an individual in a given location to fully grok that or fully take that in, because again, we may be looking around and see birds, hear birds singing and the flowers blooming and beautiful gardens and streams are running and so on, but then there are other areas that have become dead zones on the planet. The biosphere is being shredded. Desertification, global warming, climate change.
Global climate change and what that's going to mean economically, populations having to move en masse.
The collapse of the civilization, not being able to feed your populations anymore, so then people walk out or move somewhere and start all over. A lot of the people that came from Europe to the New World were fleeing environmental disaster, depth of poverty and starvation, not being able to live anymore, going to the New World. But now, where are you going to go? Where is there to go? Oil running out, peak oil, that's it. That's it. That's never happened before. The very engine of civilization.
The concept of peak oil is that basically we're right about there at the globe.
Coincided their discovery and the use of oil and industrialization of the oil economy coincided with this tremendous population burst. And it's all coming to a grinding halt.
Our industrial progress and economic growth was fired by what many seem to look on as endless energy. But warning signs were there.
The price of oil is just going to keep on rising and rising and rising. There's no way we're going to get out of this pattern because the demand is increasing and the supply is reaching a maximum.
Well, this decline is happening all over the world.
And when the demand grows greater than the immediate supply, the circuits break.
Attention all passengers, Flight 307 is canceled until further notice.
Prices are kind of nature's way of telling us that growth has to slow down globally.
So whether it's 20 years or whether it's 40 years or whether it's 50 years, doesn't matter. The end game is coming.
When the oil here is all gone, these wells will be dry, worthless.
And that's going to cause major problems, perhaps major wars, who knows what.
But it's like so many people don't even see it, don't even understand what that actually means.
I mean, I never thought they would ever come to this. I mean, I feel like I'm in a science fiction movie, a bad science fiction movie, right?
Suppose it could be an omen? Or maybe she's helping us.
That we're going to go through an extraordinary contraction of the economy, which some people would call a depression, an economic collapse. The volume of business that we're doing today, I think, is not conceivably possible 20, 30, 40 years down the road, maybe sooner than that, because our whole society is based on cheap oil. Most people don't appreciate how our whole way of life, our suburban way of life, you know, driving our SUVs. I mean, 10 years from now, I think people are going to look back and say, what were they thinking? What were we thinking?
The gas is no longer freely available at the pump. Water is no longer available for your community. People will say it's time to do things differently, or they may just take to fighting.
We are at the crossroads, either be faced with a lot of chaos, disasters, a lot of different types of sicknesses, viruses, tears from our relatives' eyes, or we can unite spiritually.
With Katrina, as bad as it was, and all the suffering people, but are they learning their lessons to get in harmony with nature? Are they learning their lessons to, or are they just thinking about their own pitiful suffering? Are they learning to get in harmony and balance with the earth and natural creation and with themselves and with Creator?
A destination that we can't avoid.
Prophecies that have been given to us by the ancient peoples of showing how we would degenerate to this point of destruction, whether it's the Mayan calendar and the Mayans, whether it's the Toltecs, whether it's the Polynesians, whether it's our great elder brothers that live in Colombia in the high mountains, who are keepers of the earth. All of them have warned us what will come if we continue this way. This is what you are creating for yourself. If you continue to make your choices the way you have, and continue with your preferences, and to live according to your pattern collectively that you've created for yourself, you are going to create such and such a scenario. That's the prophecy.
It's prophecy. It's a blessing, but it's a warning.
And people who could see that out of balance started forming these prophecies to help the people see what they were doing and what the end result would be. That's where the prophecies have come from. If we were never out of balance, there would never be a prophecy. For only to let us see a possible end result if we didn't change.
Now you can ride along with the Happy Go Spending, buy it now, young adults of today. Ride with the young adults who are buying 70% of all homes sold.
Of our relationships, the prophecies are unfolding naturally. You know, the voice of spirit that are informing us, you know, of what results will be if we don't make the changes in our life. End results are easy to see, but those end results don't necessarily have to happen if we change.
But it only can be changed if we begin to change collectively. Our choices, our patterns of behavior, our preferences, and what we support with our energy, attention,
we change our consciousness, if we move away from judgment, simply from judgment to acceptance, then those prophecies will never come about.
I think it's already coming to some extent. Recently, you look at all these horrible things. I mean, lately we've had to scratch our heads and think, what in the world is going on? Disaster after disaster after disaster. Can we handle it? And I mean, hurricanes, and we've known about some of them, and others we don't know, but there have really been a bunch of hurricanes, and a couple of them have been really devastating. And then earthquakes. And so these look like horrible things, and they are. And the human suffering is great. One way to think about them is that they are a cleansing. A lot of the native people say that earthquakes and some of the things that happen can be compared to vomiting or throwing off, a cleansing, a rebalancing, a throwing off of pollution, illness, and so forth.
Mother Earth reacts. The environment reacts to, our consciousness and to our actions, to our thoughts. And, that's why we're aware very fully and completely that there's a big cleansing of this earth coming, to just like we would take cancer out of a body, the atmosphere in Mother Earth's going to remove the cancer.
Mother Earth is going to blow her nose and powder her face, volcanoes. And so we hear the rattle, the Earth Mother talking to us.
In a real sense, the Earth has two completely different personalities. One temperament seems calm and benign, well in control of the forces locked within the Earth or playing around its biosphere. The other is a hard, hostile, often deadly nature.
The human is that being in whom the universe reflects on and celebrates itself in a special mode of conscious self-awareness.
Though we're told that all this havoc would come about, told the confusion would come about, arguments, wars would come about. But it was all part of a cleansing process. And all these things we've taken part in that look so destructive are there for us to experience them, to remove them from our lives in this consciousness that we share, so we can move to that place of balance and harmony. We had to experience all of the disharmony. And we're still having to experience it. It's obvious. I'm sitting here right now, a few days after Spirit's visit to New Orleans and the great cleansing that's going forth there. We get a chance to look at ourselves and what we do in these circumstances. All of the things in our consciousness that brought New Orleans about and what we see as destructiveness there help us become more prepared to live this life of peace, sharing, love, gentleness, kindness, and compassion.
I am no idealist or optimist in the sense of things aren't getting worse in regards to all that. The nuclear threat, yes, huge and getting and maddeningly accelerating. The way that we were aggravating other countries and going to lead to hostilities, it's nuts. I can't believe anybody with half a brain would be acting the way they are in their little sandbox. The way we're treating the planet, the way we think we can go on driving our vehicles and running our factories forever at the expense of the other species on the planet, that we're controlling evolution through genetic manipulation, that we don't allow seeds to be sold that aren't genetically manufactured by Monsanto and unable to produce a second generation of seeds. It's like, no, it's all getting worse, absolutely. Is that simply pessimistic, though?
It's going to keep on increasing until it comes to a major head, a major crisis. I think that's the point we've reached now. At this time in our lives, it's really come to this point of crisis where we can't go on another 50, 100 years like this even. I think probably even 10, 20 years is very questionable.
Things can look fine on the surface, but the hurtful dangers are below the surface, and they come out in our interactions with each other.
All we have to do is look at it. Look at what is going on. America, the United States, they have created their own enemies.
When we see these things, we talk about how terrible they are. We don't want to see these things, but what most people aren't aware of, that everything we see outside of us comes from the collective nature of who we are inside. All of it. And if any of us have done any judging, which I say we've all done, we all had something to do with 9/11.
The terrorist attacks of 9/11 being an indicator that something is wrong here, that we need to look at ourselves as a country and our foreign policy and our effects economically in the world, and see why some people feel like we're worshiping the material world instead of worshiping the divine. Instead of getting the message and kind of taking it to heart, that some people are so desperate they're taking these kind of terrorist actions to get their point across. Instead of evaluating ourselves, we retaliate, and we're going to make war on the terrorists.
These things that we see out there that we don't approve of, we need to turn around and look at ourselves, at those things inside of us we should be doing the same thing with.
So it's a clear mirror of the trail from the beginning of when the prophecy was given to the point where we have come to in this life at this time.
the Apocalypse of St. John, which, you know, was his awakening, his revelation, his vision. And apocalypse has now come to mean, you know, an awful event. You know, something apocalyptic means something that's, you know, really disastrous, cataclysmic. It actually meant the awakening, the vision. What he was seeing was just another version of, you know, whether it's the Hopi prophecy, the Kogi, or various other people. There was going to come a time of reckoning if we kept on going along this way. He was seeing things like famine, disease. He was tuning in to that same thing, that if people don't change, whether you put in, you know, spiritual terms, if people don't turn to God, or if people don't wake up in themselves, if things don't change, it's going to get more and more disastrous.
There are going to be many more Katrinas. That's just the beginning. That's just a wake-up call.
I think it's very important to define prophecy and earth changes, and to develop a different language that's more consonant and more relative to what we see with the world, with the earth, with spirit unfolding around us. The lessons of that are that there's no end to anything. Not how do we face the end or how do we circumvent the end, but that we accept that there are no ends and that we have an endless responsibility from lifetime to lifetime, from one form to the other, to the next.
When it's time for us to leave, we'll shed this body like a snake sheds its skin. And our body will go back into the earth and break back down into the atomic field, and our spirit will go on to our next job in this infinite, eternal creation.
We in this culture have separated the spirit from the flesh.
As spirit endlessly evolves through its constituent beings, of which we are only one, but one with a special assignment.
I think everybody recognizes deep in their body that this way of life has to end. There has to be a death and rebirth. But this transformation can be spiritual and metaphorical.
Transition that involves the end of our hubris, the end of our mechanized society, of our control systems, of our dependence on oil. And our place in this transition, in this return to balance. What is our place? That's really the question. People that fear an end times are also the people that fear their death. They would spend any amount of money to buy a little more time with another plastic part, with another plug-in, just a little longer on life support. Those that are afraid of quote-unquote end times are afraid to begin anything. Those that are afraid of their own deaths, afraid to die, are afraid to fully live.
That the intellect is the playground of the face of darkness. The face of darkness has found a place to live there. This thing called science arose, to become one of our greatest teachers. We want to put that intellect up there beyond everything else. All of our academic institutions are built around the intellect. And this has an influence on these prophecies and things, that I'm talking about and the results of it. The intellect itself, that we hold in such high esteem.
And so, through the years, man has watched and studied the great natural forces that were meant to serve him.
sort of humanist arrogance and superiority. Because we are superior, then it's our job to kind of arrange nature and to use nature. And science the beginnings of the scientific movement fed into that, because they fed into the separation of the spiritual and the psychic from the material. But we have this incredible experimental method we call experimental that allows us to extract information from nature, and they used all kinds of domination sort of metaphors, the metaphors of torture. We have to put nature on the rack and force her to reveal her secret so that we can lead better lives and have more control and have more mastery and all of that.
Science, it gives us the means to exploit the world so extensively, gives us no guidance whatsoever on how to use science. And it's that inability of science to guide humans in its own use that has led to such difficulty.
Type of nuclear weapon has its own safeguards against accidental nuclear explosion. These are the facts.
The intellect is the most limited source of information available to us. We try to base everything we do here on this Mother Earth these days on guidance from the intellect.
Science is very good on understanding how things work. Science does not provide meaning, and we live in this culture which is largely dominated by a scientific worldview. So we've taken a lot of meaning out, so it's not surprising that people don't find meaning in a very materialistic world.
We're so hung up on the physical in the physical form that we don't want to see it change.
Or you hold on to our survival, keep things the same, keep our mates exactly the same so they don't change. Try to get control, but we have no control.
And we're not in control of anything in the way that we think we are. We're not in control of anything.
When we accept that, we can then join and participate in a dance already in progress. A dance that includes dying and being reborn. That includes being as much in the plants and the trees as we are in our two-legged hominid bodies. And then we can accept the end of the kinds of systems that we've depended upon for our vehicles and our ways of getting around, our ways of communicating with each other. The kinds of control systems and governments that are right now crushing freedom, not only in this country but around the world, are all the result of the fear of change, all based on the illusion that there's an end.
Optical illusion. Just another case where seeing is believing.
All of that falls away, all those support systems, when even our illusions of who we are, when our concepts about who we're supposed to be, all fall aside. And then when all that's left is this trembling being, corporal being in touch with the earth, literally on your knees with tears.
The American dream is really a nightmare for the earth.
The American dream, which is greed.
Our lives have been taken over by the industrial world. Modern transportation, modern entertainment, modern education.
Modern Western approach to consumption of goods and manufacture of unnecessary objects. All the latest toys that you're encouraged to purchase and participate with.
All has created an absorbing sequence of endless activities that sweep us up.
Well, this is almost like being brainwashed.
Advertising, marketing, hypnotizes. It's almost into belief if only you had this, you'd be happy.
through repetitive selling in exciting TV commercials. Here's a preview.
It's new.
People got brainwashed into that. And so they have to live for that. And so people are brainwashed into the American dream. What is the American dream? Do they understand what it truly is? Do they understand what it really does to them? To their spirit, to that real inner person.
We all like to believe that no one can control the way we think. But there are many techniques that can be used to change the way our minds normally work.
Have become a slave to your possessions. Own all these things, and then we have to maintain them and pay for them.
We have all these luxuries, we have all this stuff.
You know, we have access to ice cream 24 hours a day. We have access to a lot of comforts and elegancies, as one pro-slavery philosopher in the 1830s put it. He was saying that slavery can't be eliminated because what would happen to our comforts or elegancies? And it's the exact same argument today.
There are more slaves in the world today than there were 150 years ago. Yet we think on the surface that slavery is abolished, that it doesn't exist. But in fact, it does exist, even in greater numbers than it did 150 years ago.
Slaves to clocks. We're slaves to the cars. We're slaves to
the mechanics of conformity.
If everybody dresses the same and marches in lockstep like the military, then that makes command and control much easier. And if everybody buys the same things, the same brands of Coca-Cola or jeans or whatever it is, that makes accumulating massive profits much easier.
We're slaves to the machines.
Tens of thousands of men on one single payroll have money for themselves and for their families to spend.
The economic system we have in our midst right now is trapping everybody. We're all caught up in it. It acts like a trap.
Large majority of the world's living on credit, which means a large number of the nations all over the world are in debt to that banking systems.
It was the ride you thought would never end. The spending spree you've grown accustomed to. Bigger homes, fancier cars, more credit cards than you could count.
It's economic slavery. Literally, you can't live if you don't generate money.
They're on this treadmill of hustle. They gotta have their elbows out, they gotta compete, they gotta rush every day, get ahead or you're behind. It's a trap.
We took on too much credit. It was part of the American dream that we were convinced we needed to be part of.
For many, that dream is now a nightmare.
Let's get this straight. All around the world, men want the same things: food, shelter, and comforts. And naturally, selfishly want all they can get. You do. I do. Everybody has this in common.
Through us putting ourselves first, trying to develop more comfort for ourselves.
That self-interest is basically destroying the planet.
That is at the root of many of our problems of today. And by continuing on the way we have, it will only We'll only continue to make things worse.
It's the hottest it's been in 400 years. Humans are to blame.
North Koreans bring another international crisis to the already long-suffering world.
Generation after generation, this complex pattern of culture traits is handed down. The group has two ways of transmitting its culture to ensure its continued existence. One way is through the natural tendency of children to imitate their elders and to learn from them.
So we're not ourselves. That's why I was shared with you the only thing that we have that is worthy of the Creator is the most honest, real, true feelings of ourselves. Everything else of ourselves have been put there. We've been told how to be, what to do, and we're an outcast if we aren't that. But what does the Creator say that we're to do? Who understands that?
It is only when we step outside of what we were trained or programmed or studied that we can be an avenue for a truth that's bigger than us.
So we've got a lot of people on this earth now, who learned, to do things in specific ways that are counter to the good health of our Mother Earth. But in their heart, they're fully aware to themselves that they're doing the right thing.
What we think is we're doing something good. That's the illusion.
These days the gas goes through all this fancy equipment, and out of it comes chemicals, which are used in making cloth and paint and plastics and I don't know what all.
Petroleum derivatives kill insects and plant diseases, speed the ripening of fruit, and preserve it on the way to market. Today, a farmer can fight the odds of nature instead of giving in to them.
That's the tragedy, is that humans thought they were doing such wonderful things for their children. They thought they were building such a wonder world for children. Now they find that we're doing great damage to the world of our children, and we are building a world in which they cannot live, and in which nothing else can live, and it's full natural growth.
Nothing about putting a 50-foot hole in Mother Earth and putting a steel piling down there and then surrounding it with concrete and building a 100-story building. No surprise to me and others that the Twin Towers were removed just to show us, that hey, you can do better than this.
Yes, man has always been a builder, but his structures have endured only when the materials he used were able to resist the forces of nature.
All this great construct of civilization they see is not the real universe that they should take for granted, but is a construct built by people before them who were no smarter than them and maybe not as smart as them, and they can make bigger and finer constructs of their own.
We have allowed ourselves to conform in such a way that we are a part of the problem.
In God we trust on the dollar. Unfortunately today that's the God that people praise. That's their God.
programming has been, that we're to control the earth, that we're to control the environment, that we have dominion over the animals.
Christianity being told to subdue the earth.
If you believe one thing, then someone else has the potential to believe another, and that creates a conflict.
The fundamentalist belief systems, no matter which religion, it's one of the most dangerous things on the planet today.
The Israelis say they were taking mortar fire from the school grounds and so responded with fire of their own.
I am a Christian, or I am a Protestant, or I am a Buddhist. These are things that are unnecessary.
How you can think that you, as a human being, are so able to speak with what God wants.
God would say this, and Jesus believed this.
You put the fear of the Lord into them, and then you show them the way to salvation. This formula has worked for a very long time. So much of the Christian experience of the sacred is seeing it, through a thumbnail, through a pinprick. It's like the sphincter of sacredness. We see so little, we experience so little in our definition of spirituality. Our society has really lost its way. I sometimes feel so sad. I mean, we're so out of balance. I mean, and we just don't even have any concept of how far out of balance we are.
Come to the realization that we can do without belief. We can deal with what is.
What we're really facing is actually a crisis of consciousness. The old mode of consciousness is not working anymore. And the old mode, in the most general sense, says, if I'm not feeling okay, if I'm not feeling at peace in myself, if I'm not feeling happy, I need to do something. And that's what we've all got caught up in, is I need to have a new experience, get something new, get my friends to be a certain way. But we fall into this belief that I can only be at peace in myself if I've got things around me the right way.
Fairly stable, long-range goals, which all the people of a given culture seek together in their effort to live in a way which they consider satisfying.
And that's what's happening now. This is consciousness gone berserk. It's consciousness that's lost its discipline, it's lost its integrity, and it's lost its guidance.
We have created a kind of hellish planet for ourselves because of our greed, our avarice, our prejudice, desire for oppression, for conquering others, for control, terrorism and injustice, aggression and oppression, of discrimination, prejudice, of overpopulation, apathy, anger, frustration, greed, the exploitation of people and resources, the destruction of the very environment that we need to sustain ourselves.
The fundamental problem is actually a psychological problem.
Within ourselves.
Just about every problem that we're facing has come out of human thinking, human decision making, based upon very limited set of values. And most of the values are usually what's good for me or what's good for my particular clan, whatever it is. It's self-interest has been driving humanity.
And unless that part is addressed, you'll never really have an adequate solution externally in the world.
What all the great spiritual traditions and just a lot of indigenous wisdom says is no, it's how I am inside. It's not how I am inside is not dependent on what goes on. It's about how I look at things. The way our Western culture works doesn't give meaning. That doesn't mean to say there isn't meaning to life. There isn't meaning in the way we've been living it.
Open a Budweiser and pour yourself the most inviting glass of beer you've ever tasted. Cold, golden Budweiser with that good taste for good times. So go ahead. Live life, every golden minute of it.
That's all part of the crisis, is how to find the meaning, to look for the meaning. How do we find that, and how do we help other people find it? It's the battle of light and dark, but it's the battle within us of light and dark. It's not a battle out there.
We're sleepwalking. We're asleep. We don't seem to get it, that we are getting very close to a tipping point on this planet. The amount of denial going on is extraordinary.
person might say that there's not a lot of time left.
The way we're living today is wrong. I think that there's a lot of wrong things with the world at large and within our own beings. It's come to a point where it's very urgent that we address that issue to try to change those issues, because we'll kill ourselves if we don't.
Is there an urgency? Yes. Nothing else matters. This is the world we're talking about. This is life on this planet. If you're not going to feel an urgency when 90% of the large fish in the oceans are gone, when's it going to be?
We as a culture are sleepwalking into the future.
Today, just the way that we live in this very fast world, that we're not thinking about the future.
Things seem sped up, going faster.
Acceleration is because the heat gets turned up anytime there's a change.
Pushing all this unresolved pain and suffering right upon us. And we're face to face with it every moment of our life now. There's no respite from it. We've got to resolve it or die.
That's what's going on, is an acceleration and a raising of the heat. Only with the raising of the heat is it possible for the kinds of metamorphosis and change. And things have never moved faster than they are right now. We're not just talking the pace of technology or how quick the environment's being destroyed. It's everything speeding up.
Evolution has always been accelerating. And it's now going so fast that we're seeing changes in our own lifetimes. But it used to be over decades, it's now over years. And the reason it accelerates is each new development makes it easier for future developments. And so a good example is the Industrial Revolution. From that we learned the technologies of mass production and marketing and distribution. And now we're using computers and telecommunications to make things move faster and faster. It's going to keep on going faster and faster. And the challenge is going to be, can we as individuals cope with that increasing pace without burning out, going crazy. Because what happens is, every time the world changes in some way, whether it's the stock market going up and down, or there's some new political crisis or environmental crisis or health thing or terrorism, we go into crisis and we start panicking because we're being almost like blown around by the winds of change. How do we wake ourselves up from this sort of materialistic stupor?
We are creating a catastrophic event for ourselves to wake ourselves up.
We need a wake-up call. So some of these people telling about ominous predictions and things to come, and that we've sort of been asleep to, and that's kind of like a shaking, like wake up.
If we don't make some conscious waking up choices, now we are going to destroy this planet and all life on it. We're on a path of self-destruction. It's getting worse and worse and worse. It's not getting better. The planet isn't getting healthier as we advance in our technology. It's getting sicker and sicker.
We are seeing louder and louder alarm bells.
We were to deal with 2 or 3 more major incidents in the state of California. Fires, floods, natural disasters, or man-made disasters. There's not enough depth of resources in the state.
Declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles.
This is just the beginning.
We're already plagued by serious drought.
Summer drought has led to wildfires that are sweeping across.
California tonight could be the latest evidence of global warming.
Incredibly hot, it topped out. Smoke is just piling up over Los Angeles.
For dozens of homeowners, it's too late. The fire moved so quickly, the true extent of the damage remains unclear.
A lot of times the ability to see what's coming gives you the warning, gives you the chance to do something. If you see somebody, sort of starting to fall asleep and they're about to run off the cliff or the edge of the mountain or something, you holler, hey, wake up.
Ya hace rato los sabios han dicho, ya el fin del mundo está cerca.
We're living in a time when these monolithic systems are breaking down.
What we call civilization is a failed experiment. The writing is on the wall that it's already failed.
And we should be saying, hey, it was a nice experiment. It didn't work for us. It didn't actually make us feel any better. And it's not working for the planet as a whole.
We have an economic collapse, and we'll either have that or something close to it.
We're actually living through the collapse of industrial civilization.
Civilization as we know it is untenable, not only destructive and hurtful and abstracting us from our very emotions, but also untenable and can't last.
Civilizations have collapsed before, empires have collapsed before.
There's no way we in the West can continue with this level of lifestyle, and the rest of the world also wanting it. China, India, and places in South America also coming along, developing very fast, like Brazil, to say, oh no, you can't do this, you can't have all the cars we've had and the energy and the luxuries.
So if we would have some sort of an economic collapse, back to the drawing board kind of thing, it may be useful. And then we may come